What's up guys, it's Tom here and we have another scandal in the Premier League because WhatsApp messages have revealed, and this is a big story in the Telegraph, that the Newcastle United takeover was controlled by the Saudi Arabia Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And also the biggest scandal is that the UK government and Boris Johnson at the time put pressure on the Premier League to accept Newcastle United trying to buy Saudi Arabia buying Newcastle. The UK government put pressure on the Premier League to let the Newcastle takeover happen, and Boris Johnson himself put pressure on the Premier League. And then Boris Johnson later even wrote to the UK Parliament denying this, basically lying and cheating their way, because the UK government wanted to protect the big fat contracts and the big fat money coming in, the big bags of money coming in from Saudi Arabia to the United Kingdom. And what do you think about this? Do you think Newcastle should be forced to change its ownership? Do you think Saudi Arabian owners should be forced to sell Newcastle United? In my opinion, yes, because originally the Premier League blocked the Newcastle United takeover, but then when the Premier League received legal assurances that it wasn't actually Saudi Arabia but an independent investor, PIF, buying Newcastle, but the PIF chair is the same guy as the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And the messages from the businesswoman Amanda Staveley, who recently sold her shares in Newcastle and basically got out of the club, these messages claim that the Saudi Crown Prince himself pulled the strings behind the scenes of this very controversial deal. So we will take a look at all the details in this video. And this Telegraph article claims that these leaked WhatsApp messages suggest that the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman personally controlled the takeover of Newcastle United by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. The messages from Amanda Staveley, who brokered the sale by, Mike Ashley to the Public Investment Fund, it raises questions over guarantees made to the Premier League to secure the deal, because the bottom line is Saudi Arabia as a state would have failed the fit and proper Premier League owners test, and that's why they had to do a workaround. And the ruler of Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince, was signing off key decisions. These WhatsApp messages suggested. At one point, Miss Staveley warns the sellers that the Crown Prince is losing patience, and when the deal hit trouble, she said the governor of PIF was trying to convince the Crown Prince not to pull out. The messages shed new light on the extent of political involvement in the takeover as well. So here you can see these WhatsApp messages, or at least some of it, and I will show you more in the video. Miss Staveley enlisted the help of the Saudi ambassador to the UK to rescue the deal. On August the 6th, 2020, the UK Saudi ambassador spoke to the Crown Prince this morning. This was the message: we need to update the Saudi ambassador as he needs to update the Crown Prince. And what is absolutely scandalous is that in 2021, Boris Johnson, then Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, said that his government was not involved at any point in the takeover talks on the sale of Newcastle in a written parliamentary answer. So Boris Johnson not only lied, but he misled the UK Parliament and the UK public, basically lying in their face. And this is just one of many scandals of Boris Johnson, so I'm not really surprised. I'm not from the UK, so I don't have any political affiliation with any parties in the UK, but the scandals that Boris Johnson were involved are really disgraceful and very shady, and shame on him, really. However, Miss Staveley was in direct contact with Lord Grimstone, then the Minister for Investment. So the UK government's Minister for Investment was in direct contact with Miss Staveley in brokering this Newcastle takeover, and she told the sellers of the club that the minister pushed behind the scenes and made it very clear that their preference is for the deal to go ahead. The Premier League initially blocked the sale of Newcastle United to a consortium led by the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund over the concerns that the club would in reality be controlled by the Saudi state, which I think we all suspected. But now it has come out clear as day that Newcastle is in fact controlled by the Saudi state, and that's why I'm saying the Premier League should make the PIF sell Newcastle United. Just like they made Chelsea be sold by Roman Abramovich, Newcastle shouldn't have a state owning the club, and Man City's owners should be made to sell the club as well, for various reasons which we talked about in many of my previous videos. And Miss Stavely said through her lawyers that she only referenced the Crown Prince in this capacity as chairman of PIF to suggest that her message is cast doubt on whether the assurances about independence from the Saudi state have been adhered to subsequently is as illogical and as misconceived. She is taking us for fools if she thinks that we would believe all of this, that this is all legal and over the table. And the sale eventually went through after, I think, more than a year of delay, after the Premier League received legally binding assurances that the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia is in fact separate from the Saudi state. But how can it be separate when the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is the chairman of this Public Investment Fund, and the Public Investment Fund is in fact controlled by Saudi Arabia because the Saudi state control everything basically in that country. And not only would they have failed the fit and proper test because of the dreadful human rights records, but they are also pirating and streaming illegally Premier League games in Saudi Arabia. And that is also a crime in the United Kingdom. And what the Saudi Arabian state is doing in their country, many of those things are crimes in the UK as well. So murders, beheadings and things like that are also crimes in the United Kingdom. So Saudi Arabia as a state would have failed the fit and proper test if they wanted to buy Newcastle United. A CIA report concluded that the Crown Prince was responsible for ordering the 2018 murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi dissident and Washington Post journalist, which was still fresh when the takeover was first proposed. And that guy was sold in pieces in the Saudi embassy. It's a horrible story. When I learned about that, I was absolutely sick to my stomach. And to think that a country like this, who does things like this, is able and allowed to actually own a Premier League football club is frankly disgusting to me. And also it's even more disgusting that the UK government was involved in making this takeover happen. The Premier League and the UK government sold their souls for money. It's important to state that foreign countries are not banned from owning Premier League clubs under its own rules, but the Saudi state was accused of illegally pirating Premier League games on a state-run channel, which of course the Premier League was very vehemently against, and the Premier League eventually removed its objections after being convinced that PIF would be acting independently of the Saudi state in the running of Newcastle United. I mean, how gullible and how silly the Premier League is. I don't think they were gullible. I think Boris Johnson and the UK government directly put pressure on the Premier League to allow the takeover to happen, because there were multi-billion pound contracts with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi threatened to pull those contracts under the feet of the United Kingdom if the takeover isn't allowed to happen, which is frankly blackmail and distortion. So it's a really disgusting story in my opinion. Mr. Stavely said at the time of the takeover that the PIF was an autonomous, commercially driven investment fund. But how can it be autonomous when it is led by the same guy who is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia? On March the 3rd, 2020, Miss Stavely told Mike Ashley and his camp, the owner of Newcastle at the time, that the Crown Prince is losing patience I need to assure him we will get there. And later she messaged Mr. Ashley's team to say His Excellency Yashilan Rumayyan is trying to hang on to the deal and convince the Crown Prince not to pull out. And this is the most damning indictment of what actually happened with the UK government and their involvement in the takeover. Miss Staveley had WhatsApped Mr. Ashley's team to say Number 10 can't get any further involved. Basically, the government can't get any more involved than what they have done to date. Lord Grimstone said that they pushed behind the scenes and made it very clear that their preference is for the deal to go ahead. They are obviously very aware of the damage this has caused and the repercussions for future investments. So the UK was afraid that the Saudi Arabia won't invest any further in the United Kingdom and they would lose out on tons of money. It's all about the money. That's what this modern capitalist world is leading towards, that if you follow the money, you will see the true story emerging. And when the Telegraph newspaper asked the Premier League to comment, they declined to comment. However, the PIF actually made a comment. A spokesman for them said, in October 2021, following a lengthy investigation, the Premier League announced that the sale of Newcastle had completed following the receipt of assurances that the government of Saudi Arabia would not control the club. The facts and circumstances that underpin those assurances, as confirmed at the time to the Premier League, remain unchanged. Miss Staveley said she was entirely confident that the assurances had been adhered to. But yeah, this reeks of corruption and disgusting blackmail, and it just doesn't feel right. It never felt right that whole countries can own a football club in the Premier League. That wasn't right when Man City was bought, that wasn't right when Newcastle was bought. I mean, a Russian oligarch was allowed to buy Chelsea, and that was the first domino to fall, and then the rest is just going downhill in football. So these leaks messages show that how closely involved the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Prime Minister and de facto ruler, was in the progress of this Newcastle takeover deal. The Crown Prince, known by his initials MBS, is the man accused of ordering the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, which we already talked about, and he was strangled and dismembered by an assassination team in Turkey in 2018, I think in a Saudi embassy in Turkey. And what is even more disgusting is that even though Premier League clubs and fans were troubled by the possibility of Newcastle United being controlled by a foreign government with one of the world's worst human rights records, the UK government was happy to work behind the scenes to make the deal happen, because they wanted to keep a strategic and economic ally like Saudi Arabia happy. So what do you think about this? That the UK government was influencing the Premier League board, meaning that Parliament was misled, because Boris Johnson has written to the Parliament explicitly denying this. The implication is that the Premier League board was strong-armed into accepting the takeover against their will and in contradiction to the proper processes that needed to follow per their contracts with the clubs. And the legal assurances were merely bogus props for the Premier League board to externally justify their shift in position. This was all assumed by many to be happening at the time, but it was impossible to prove because it would require many people to be lying and acting in bad faith. That is hard to prove, but these leaked WhatsApp messages demonstrate that this is what was happening. Look up the Telegraph news article if you want to see all the WhatsApp messages in detail, and the consequences for this are very hard to predict, so we will have to wait and see what the Premier League will do, but probably nothing, because the UK government is still in bed with Saudi Arabia, having huge contracts, weapons contracts and all kinds of investments, and also Saudi Arabia have a huge investments in the United Kingdom for billions of pounds, and the United Kingdom don't want to lose those investments. But the UK government shouldn't be influencing the Premier League, but the fact is the politics, the dirty politics are still involved in the beautiful sport of football, which is not so beautiful anymore in the Premier League. I feel every day that these stories are coming out. The beautiful game is going downhill on a very sad trajectory, but that's just my feeling, my opinion. Let me know what is yours in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a nice day. See you later. Goodbye.